Hello, my name's Nick Harris. I'm a children's book illustrator based in the UK, which I've been doing for about the last 30 years on a full-time freelance basis. Today we're going to be talking about the heady mix of horror and humour and hopefully how to balance them so that it works. Well, which is very subjective, of course. What you're seeing at the moment is me doing a bit of early sketching in Art Rage Studio Pro 4.04 using the Precise Pencil. While that goes on for a few minutes, I'll just go over the questions that were poked up at the start, a lot of which are based on very bad puns, which is an answer to a question a bit later that we'll get to. What are the stakes if you get it wrong? Well, the bottom line is that unless you make loads of mistakes, you're not going to learn. So it's not going to hurt you to get it wrong, unless it's for some sort of crucial deadline or something like that you're doing for a job, in which case you're probably not looking at this bit of vidcap anyway, because you should be busy working. Is this combination of horror and humour where you can clean up and be very successful? Well, if you look at franchises like Buffy, looking back further at things like Rocky Horror Picture Show, they are immensely successful. And this balance of horror and humour, a combination of things, has been popular for years and years and years. And so yes, you get it right. Look at how popular horror still is, and there's nearly always humour involved in it as well. And so yes, it's well worth looking at. Is it important how you dress it up? Yes. Dependent on the genres, there are very specific sort of guidelines, looks, mythologies with the different genres. As I said, I'm a children's book illustrator, so the way I present it is going to be different to how I would be trying to present it if I was in the games industry, for instance. How do you keep it fresh? Well, look at how they keep reinventing zombies and vampires and that kind of thing. It's related as time goes on, life changes, and accordingly our perspective on these different traditional mythologies and stuff changes. So it almost naturally keeps fresh. But do introduce different ideas. Are details important? Well, the same thing about how dressing it up. Yes, genre-specific details do become important, and actually will explain what's going on better. You don't have to go over the top. You don't do every eyelash. Again, all personal choice. How do you keep it relatable? Same thing. Think about stuff in your own life that means things to you, that make sense to you, and then bring those kind of things into the imagery. Well, how gruesome is too gruesome? Children's book illustrator question again. I can't do blood and guts everywhere and then say that's a suitable book for a 4 or 5-year-old. Well, I could do it, but no publisher would agree with me. It's a personal taste thing. What will upset some people will just wash over others, and we'll be fine with it. Have I worked on any horror humour projects over the years? Yes, of course I have. Because it's so popular, these kind of things just come up. A Puffin book of Ghosts and Ghouls, which was a collection of short stories, had some that were actually quite sad and sort of full of pathos, and others that were very funny. And it's very popular. You will encounter it. You just will encounter it. So yes, if you're working in any aspect of the industry, you're likely to come across this combination. Do fantasy characters have a place in this stuff? Absolutely. Fairy tales, folk tales are full of characters that do really horrible, gruesome things. Traditionally, fairy tales were really quite nasty, with a capital nah. So yeah, they fit right in. One of my favourite films over the years, well, I'm an older chap. As I said, I've been working in this 30 years. I still remember going to the Pictures to see American Werewolf in London, which I still think is a great film because it's got a really nice balance of horror and humour. And yes, the special effects now, look at it. Oh, look, he's wearing a rubber mask. But that's not the point. It's the balance of scenes like where there's a businessman late at night on the underground where the tunnels are almost deserted, being stalked by the werewolf after his first change, and you hardly see it, is really quite not nice at all. And then that's balanced by very silly humour of the werewolf himself being stalked by the decaying ghosts of his victims, done in a very humorous way. So that kind of thing, yeah, brilliant. And there's any number of examples since then and before then. Before that, Young Frankenstein by Mel Brooks, which was a parody of the sort of Frankenstein film. Super, just makes me roar with laughter still. As I said, any number of... They're still making them now. And making them more relatable to the modern audience. So yes, absolutely. Where do I get my ideas? Well, I'd said I start with bad puns sometimes. That's one way of doing it. But as in Young Frankenstein, take a well-trodden path and then just go, what if? What if that hadn't happened? What if it happened this way? And it's just a good starting point. Or just play with words. Not necessarily puns, but word association, that kind of thing. Anything to get you started. But the main thing, just keep drawing. Like you're seeing up there on the vid cap at the moment. So let's get back to that. This silly idea is about a vampire hunter who's run out of steaks, and the vampire thinks he's going to have her, not in that sense, just in the I'm going to get her neck, but no, she's got a really good backhand, so he just knocks his teeth out with a mallet. That silly idea. Each figure is based on 2 layers, each set to multiply, where I work out the figure itself, the body, and then put the clothes over the top on another layer, and then I worked out the arc of the swing because I was trying to get the positioning of the figures right. I spent a long time on trying to get which is still probably not right, trying to get the juxtaposition right, because the pose is important, which is another point. I've started with the figures because that is the main thing, and I should really put background in, like I'm doing there. And I've also blocked the figures in, which you'll see why a bit later. If you've not used ArtRage at all, that's how I would do a perspective rig, using the stencil rulers, because you can pin them at one corner, and then set up the red horizon line on a separate layer, so I can always see when I'm placing things if it's above or below the eye line. It's just handy stuff. And then I slap layers of tone in, again set to multiply. As you can see, there's 4. I've enlarged it so you can see there's 4, all of which are being worked into, building up tonal value. And you can still see the horizon line sticking out like a sore thumb, but you will have to remember to get rid of that later if you're using that kind of thing. And the reason I blocked in the figures on a separate layer was so that I could then use that option to make a stencil from each that helps you pick out the figures without having to meticulously go round. It's the same idea as masks in Photoshop, that kind of thing. And you can see beginning to sort of pick them out a bit more. It looks like they're doing some strange Charleston at the moment, which isn't the idea. I'm going to have to do some sort of impact thing by his face, and this is why the arc became important. I will have to give some indication of that. But as you can see, I'm beginning to bring in a bit of lighting in the background. And I thought that as part of the setting up the scene, I'll need to have a few other vampires staked around the place. Otherwise you won't think, well, why isn't she staking him? And then, oh, maybe she's got no stake in her hand anymore. Wouldn't make sense otherwise. Now I've zinged it up quite a bit more, and you maybe begin to notice, as I was beginning to notice at this point, that she looks a bit anorexic. She's really, really thin. She looks like almost like a stick woman. I know he's skinny, but it's not so noticeable. So it just started to work her up a little bit more to make sense of her as a figure. As you see, the drawing's still very crude, but in a very dark scene you can sort of get away with it because it's sort of lost a bit. crisped up a little bit more still. This is just what you're going to see, really, it gradually developing. Starting to think about putting a figure in the background, propped up against the wall, but that pose isn't particularly nice. I think that will be changed very slightly. Yeah, it is. Now you can see that I did that because I started to switch the layers off so that I could work on the figures a little bit in isolation, as it were, and see what I was doing. And you can see how crude and corny and cartoony the figures are, and that's where I flattened the figures to one layer, the body colour that is. Then I could make a stencil of both of them to work on together. You can just turn that off in the stencils palette, off and on. Now you can see I've actually started to put the mallet and that in. There's all sorts of drawing problems as we go. This is part of just how I work. You don't have to work this way. I would work personally in a much more organised way if I was more organised. I kind of do it as I go along. Put a bit of floor detail in here, so they're actually seems like they're standing on something, and at the same time then introduce some shadows that make more sense to place them on the floor, and then start zinging up the tombs a bit. Now I think I show next is how I'm doing that. No, I'm not showing how I'm doing that, but this was all done with one texture stencil that I just did onto various layers using the chalk, and then just transformed like that. See, it was all using that basic stencil onto different layers, transformed to fit the different bits of wall and tomb, and then also I made a stencil of it so that I could reverse it to beef it up with a darker tone, so it picked it out more where I wanted to, because the wall was getting a bit lost in terms of detail. See, I inverted the stencil, and then, as I said, you can just turn it off and on in the stencils palette, as with all the stencils. Any stencils you make or place there, you can turn any active ones, you can turn on or off. And you see it's a bit more zingy. In fact, it looks a bit like it needs a good clean now. And I don't think I've cut away on the figures then. This is why that's a bit better. They stand out from the wall a bit more now. His hair needs to be picked out, obviously, because he's blending into the wall. Now the figures on the floor are beginning to make a bit more sense. The one at the back, they're got the vampy women. One at the back, one at the front. One at the front clearly with a stake in her back, because that's part of the message. You have to make the message clear when it's something like this. And I've put more layers over the top, darkening again, as you can see, because it wasn't too neat enough or nighttime enough. It could have been daylight, and then that would have blown the mythology about going into ultraviolet light and all that stuff. Because I'm a traditionalist, I think no, they shouldn't be able to go into daylight. They're not like Angel, a spin-off from Buffy. And talking of daylight and daylight hours, I was running out of time to work on this, so I had to collapse all the layers and do a bit more fiddling with various tools on it to bring it to this stage, and this is where I've had to stop. So I don't know if you get anything out of this, but I hope you do. And I will see you next time. Bye!